You awaken in a cargo container, unloading on a derelict space station known as the Eye. You remember that you are what is known as a sleeper, an automaton frame housing the emulated consciousness of a human who sold the rights to their brainwaves to a megacorporation while their body chills in a cryochamber. That's just how hard you can get capitalism in the future, and you remember that you are in the middle of making an escape from indefinite servitude. Upon your arrival at the station, you have 3 problems. Your body is designed to deteriorate if you don't take a supplement manufactured by the corporation that owns you. There's a bounty hunter from said corporation coming to find you, and you need some goddamn money. Welcome to Random Game Reviews. I made a spreadsheet containing every game in the PlayStation Store, and use my chatbot pal as a random number generator to determine which games I will play and review. This time, however, I asked my supporters on Patreon what games they wanted to see me review, and pulled from that list, which is why I'm reviewing Citizen Sleeper. Citizen Sleeper is not a regular sort of game. It's kind of like a board game and a novel had a kid together. Except the board game isn't a super involved parent. But, like any good board game, you need to sit down and read the instruction manual before you can start having fun. Since you've gotten far enough into the internet that you're able to watch videos, it's safe to assume you can read. That will come in handy, because reading is definitely the main thing you'll be doing in Citizen Sleeper. This game kind of vibes like really old text-based RPGs. The thing I found engaging with this game, which is essentially a visual novel with extra steps, is that a lot of the narration is the main character's self-reflection as they grapple with who or what they are and where they fit in this new world. I'll come back to the writing later in the video, but first, let's explore where we are and how the game works. The Eye is an off-the-grid space station that's as decrepit as it is semi-lawless. There are different factions that control various industries and sectors, and you'll need to decide who you can trust as a piece of illegal runaway corporate property. You interact with the Eye via this overworld that has various points of interest marked on it like a map of Six Flags, and it honestly doesn't look like much. But a weird thing happened to me, where the more I played the game, the more this started to feel like a tangible world. For instance, this may look like a blip on a map, but it's where I solidified what I felt was my first real friendship on the station. And this blip over here? Well, that's where I sold shipmined fragments for quick cash, which bit me in the ass the literal next day, when I got not 1, but 2 quest lines that required me to make ship mines. These various locations are where you exert your influence in the world. You talk to characters, investigate mysterious goings-on, drink mushroom whiskey, sell your labor for money, get hassled by a vending machine, or, in game terms, it's where you move storylines along and expend action dice. There is a surprising amount of breadth and variation in the locations, especially as you unlock new areas, and the fact that you have to expend action dice to explore gives your journey across the Eye a real sense of weight. Action dice, condition, and hunger are the 3 biggest gameplay elements you'll encounter. At the start of each day, or cycle as it's called in Citizen Sleeper, you will have a series of 6-sided dice rolled for you, and this represents your resource pool for taking actions. This is where the board game parent makes its child support payments. Your dice can be spent on actions to acquire money or resources, as well as working towards goals that move certain storylines forward. Each action you attempt to take will have a set difficulty, and the value of your dice will determine the likelihood of a positive, neutral, or negative outcome. The dice mechanic is interesting because it forces you to make constant risk-reward decisions and impacts what you can accomplish in a day. It's a neat choice to have dice not be used for games of chance, but rather as a currency, and how you can spend your dice will greatly impact how you proceed through the game. Do you save your high dice rolls to clear a high-risk task to help a friend? Or do you spend it on a dangerous job to get money you desperately need? Do you risk a high chance of failure to search the low end for a doctor's office, or play it safe working a shift at the noodle house? As a general rule, if you want to do something important, but your dice are bad, you probably just shouldn't do that thing, unless you're a cool badass renegade like me. Crap. Netting a positive result yields additional resources and mission progress, and beefing an action can lead to loss of resources or literal damage to your being. And damage to your being is bad because as your condition deteriorates, you get access to fewer action dice at the start of the cycle. That's actually extra bad because the Eye functions a bit like the American healthcare system, where you have to drop some serious cash if you want access to the medicine you need to get better. You'll also need to manage your hunger because if you drop down to starving, that also begins to erode your condition. So it's important to regularly ingest edible fungus, a staple of a balanced robot diet. Citizen Sleeper bills itself as an RPG, which I think might be a bit of an oversell. You can select a character class at the beginning, which will have different positive and negative modifiers to the in-game actions you can take, but players can render this a moot point very quickly by easily upgrading their way out of their deficits. What the stat modifiers modify is the difficulty of tasks, making your dice more powerful at things you're good at. But this is pretty much as deep as it gets as a role-playing game. Drives are your quest lines in Citizen Sleeper, and they cover a wide range of objectives, such as get medicine, help repair a ship, stop a mercenary from killing you, defeat a malignant AI, and blow the lid off a station-wide conspiracy. Each time you complete a drive, you are rewarded with an upgrade point to boost your stats. Drives are straightforward, but you have a metric ton of active story threads going at any given time, and I found the main challenge of the game to be managing between over a dozen competing priorities. One drive is basically don't die, and another one is like, find this guy some fancy mushrooms to cook. And while the choice seems like a no-brainer, the funny thing was that even when I had some high priority stuff going on, every now and then, I'd feel compelled to spend a cycle helping my friend renovate their pub. Some of these quest lines take you to unexpected, wondrous, or heartbreaking places, and while most of them can be handled at your own pace, others are a race against the clock. Since your sleeper is an autonomous AI, there's a world within the eye for you to explore. The cloud is a digital dimension that exists on top of the physical layout of the eye, which represents all of the data and network activity on the station. This is where you can extract secret data about corporate overlords or the local Yadigan gang to sell or use on missions, and is where the game lets you spend your sucky dice rolls, since hacking asks for specific dice results. Oh, and there's some disquieting stuff in the cloud that I won't spoil because it's more fun to experience on your own. I'm going to confess that I found this to be a really hard script to write. Firstly, because it's basically explaining the rules of a board game and the plot synopsis of a book at the same time, and secondly, because this is a very thoughtful and earnest game, and I traffic in nonsense. Regardless, I loved this game's story. Citizen Sleeper tackles two major themes really well. The first is what it means to have a life and to be an individual, and the second is how much that life can be devalued by unfettered capitalism. The game weaves a story about the tension between dignity and wage slavery that is applicable to modern times, but never wallows in hopelessness, which is a common issue with dystopian stories. While the explorations of what existence can hold for an AI who is not fully bound to the material plane are truly interesting, where Citizen Sleeper excels is in presenting the loneliness of being an outsider in a new place. Even though you play as a character that is more than human, the game presents an incredibly human experience as you navigate who you can and cannot trust and balance your need for safety against your need for closeness to others. I found the writing in this game to be evocative, and was delighted each time I met a new character, as through each new person I met, I felt my sleeper come more into their own. These characters represent many different walks of life on the Eye, from tradespeople to chefs, spacefaring badasses or underworld gangsters to rise and grind space hustlers. Some will accept you without a second thought, while others who may seem friendly on the surface will use and abuse you. I think the game's greatest victory is how much I came to care about and loathe some of these characters. Citizen Sleeper at its core is a game about connection, and there were so many little moments throughout that I found truly surprising, be it how quickly I could come to care about a coworker and their adopted child, how rich a purely digital existence could be, how much money I was willing to invest in cat food for a feline roommate that barely acknowledged me, or how I always felt like putting my trust in people was the right thing to do, even when I was at a disadvantage, which is something the game showed me about myself. I would say after I moved past learning all the mechanics in the first hour, I was fully invested in the story. And something truly awesome happens as you progress through the story, when you find that you're no longer just surviving, but instead living a life. As I moved towards endgame, I realized I was quickly running out of time to tie up loose ends. In my frantic maximizing of a finite number of days, I had to quickly decide which relationships meant the most to me and what work could not afford to go unfinished. When I reached the specific ending I had worked towards, the game offered me a decision that is definitely among the hardest I've ever had to make in a game, where to do what felt like the right thing, I had to make a very heartbreaking choice. But the fact that I could make a hard choice to be true to the character I had cultivated is a mark of incredible storytelling. I know I've been vague and rambly, but all of this is to say that I found Citizen Sleeper to be an incredibly emotionally impactful game, and it gave me a true sense of stake in the world and the people who inhabit it. While the presentation, the art, and mechanics are fairly simplistic, the game delivers an experience that's bigger than the sum of its parts. It's not for everyone, and it's definitely more of a visual novel than an RPG, but if you're like me and didn't know that you had an intense craving for a story about a brutal capitalist dystopia, punctuated by kindness and empathy, then you could find worse ways to spend 5 to 6 hours than helping a friend scour for fancy fungus and doing your earnest best to do right by a talking vending machine. It's time to answer the question, would I play this game if I were not destined to do so? For Citizen Sleeper, the answer is yes. The game mechanics kept things interesting by imposing limits on what I was able to accomplish on any given cycle, turning the experience into a well-executed succession of risk-reward puzzles. The writing was exceedingly well done and really made me care about my sleeper and the people I met on the eye. Everything about this game, from the art to the game mechanics to the soundtrack, would not be enough to sell this game on their own, but what they support is a truly touching story that I'm really glad to have experienced. A big thank you to Phil Metal Jacket for this suggestion. If you want to take part in future Patreon Game Request episodes, all you have to do is head to patreon.com/randomgamereviews and sign up at the second or third tier. Also, considering this was a game about connection, I'd be a fool to not mention my Discord server, which is filled with my favorite people I've ever encountered on the internet. If you want to have a nice time in an online community filled with kind and funny people, follow the link in the video description. Until next time, make sure to eat your fungus so you can be a big strong robot. And I'll see you all soon on Random Game Reviews. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Thank you for supporting my dad's Patreon. It's so nice of you.